All right, and we're not seeing attendees, correct? So I can just jump into it.
I think a lot of people are joining actually just right now.
Oh, then let me go for it.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Alicia Colmar. I'm an occupational therapist. We're here to talk about seeing private clients this summer and making sure you've got all your ducks in a row to cover yourself and get clients. So that's what we're talking about today. Um, Here with Next Level OT. I'm one of the mentors and we'll say pediatric OT, but I'll tell you a little more about me in just a sec. Let's go over what we're talking about today. We are highly focused on licensure, ethical, liability, all that's a big piece of what we're talking about today because you want to protect yourself. And we have a lot to go over with that. We're going to talk about some different things that you're going to need to have in place, even just for seeing a couple of clients, and then how to get those clients. And just keeping in mind, this is very quick, a quick run. And anything that, so just some questions at the end to think about to see if this is worth your time and if it's something that you want to do. Okay. I just see there's something in the chat. Oh, thank you, Kara. Um, I'm not going to keep an eye on the chat very easily, so please interrupt me if you see something I need to address. I also just want to point out that this is kind of like a surface level of the minimum that you would need to still be ethical and legal to see a couple of clients. If you were going to start a private practice, there's a lot of other things that you would want to consider doing as well. This is sort of the, if you have sort of a high risk tolerance, but still want to be legal and ethical and don't want to have to do all the things officially for a business, because that's essentially what you're doing if you're even seeing one or two clients. That, there's a lot of things that we're not just going to recommend because it wouldn't be cost effective just for a couple of people that you're seeing over the summer or on the side. So this is really side gig, surface level stuff, but the ethics and legal, we're definitely covering that to make sure you have that set. There we go. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am an OT that's been one for 26 years. I can't believe I'm old enough to say that. I have a private practice and school contracts. I started working for myself in 2010 part-time doing school contracts. And then in 2015, I went full-time into my business to do private clients and group therapy. So group therapy is really what got me all gung-ho to work for myself, in addition to the school contracts, which kind of almost fell in my lap. And so I'm doing that now. And then over the years, I've learned a lot about business just from all my experiences with coaching myself and reading and classes and all the things. Learned a lot of things the hard way as well. So I hope to share some of those insights with you today. I'm also a next level OT mentor and coach with the Therapy Business Builder program. And I wrote a book and I created a product. So the book I'm making a second edition for, so don't go buy that because that second edition is coming out about anxiety. And then this product is out there now too. So I like to do a lot of things and I like change and I like new challenges. So that kind of represents a lot of my different experiences. Okay, so some of the things that you need to think about ethically before you get going and taking any private clients and seeing people on the side is that, is there a conflict of interest? So if you are a school-based therapist, you may generally it's considered a conflict of interest to take on any of the kids that you see at the school. So it's best just to make that a hard no. There may even be policies within your school district that you can't see any of the kids that you work with in that school or that are even in the school that you're in on the side. So make sure you have those two things covered so you're not getting into trouble with some kind of conflict of interest situation. If you're an occupational therapy assistant, no one says you can't do some stuff on the side, but you also have to be ethical and making sure you've got your supervision. We're going to talk a little more about, tutoring versus coaching versus therapy, and maybe some of that and how that might play a little differently for you all. Then also, this may not even occur to you necessarily, but do you have enough time to implement a plan of care? How much time do you actually have over the summer that you could see somebody or over time? And maybe it would spill into the school year as well. If there are people you would see after school, for example. But sometimes people end up they have this great idea that, oh, I want my kid to get some therapy, but oh wait, we're going to be out of town this week and that week and that week and that week, and then you're going to be out of town this week and that week, and how much can you really do in 2 or 3 sessions, right? Is it really worth all that effort to get everything set up to do that and then not really be able to see them and implement enough to be meaningful in the differences that you're going to make? Not to say that you can't be meaningful in 2 to 3 sessions, but by the time you get rapport and you might be able to give a little bit of help to the parents, make a little bit of a difference, but it's just a lot to take on and can be more stressful than it's worth if you ultimately don't have that much time to implement a plan of care. You probably need a few weeks, really, to be ethical about it. Some legal things to consider. First of all, we're pediatric therapists, I think all here, but some people might see adults as well, and you might decide that you want to do a little bit of that on the side. Well, you can't opt out of Medicare. I just want to make sure to throw that out there in case that is something you're considering. PTs, OTs, speech therapists, we have to take Medicare. It's a law. And so you can get into trouble if you don't. It's a silly law. Counselors can opt out, doctors can opt out, but we cannot. So just know you would have to get in network with or in as a provider of Medicare if you're going to see anybody of Medicare age. So um, another very important thing to consider is your Practice Act and what it says. So this would be the first thing I would ask you to do and think that you should put on your list of things to do is to review your Practice Act. What are some of the things that might affect you seeing clients by yourself? So when you first started your practice or started working as a therapist in your state, you probably hopefully you read the Practice Act and you saw what you can and can't do. And you probably glossed over anything that was about a business because you didn't have one, right? Well, technically you have a business if you're seeing clients on the side. So you have to go back and look at that piece of things as well as it's a good idea just to look at all of it because there's other pieces that are going to factor in as well. So what you might find in the Practice Act is that it says something about corporations. And the thing about that is you're like, oh, I'm not a corporation. I just want to see a couple kids. And they are talking about you most of the time. So they're talking about having a business as a therapist. If you see that word in there, don't be too intimidated by it or think it's a big deal. But there probably are some things in there that you need to know. Now, most states, you should be able to work as a sole proprietor. You don't have to go set up your own business with an LLC and go through the state and all that stuff. You want to make sure of that, though, in the state that you're working, that it's okay to work as a sole proprietor or contractor. Um, New York and California always have different weird rules, so double check those especially. But most of the time, you can just you're considered like a contractor, sole proprietor, same thing. They're interchangeable words. Is you're just kind of being your own contractor to take on your own clients, and usually that's okay. So don't feel like you have to go set up a whole separate business just for taking on a couple people over the summer. But you need to look on your Practice Act to see if referrals are required. Do you need a doctor's order to be able to see any kids? So some states are direct access. That means that you don't need a doctor's order. Some have special rules in certain circumstances where if it's a rehab thing, for example, then yes, you do, because that means to getting back to a baseline, you need the doctor to be able to follow through. Some, if it's more developmental, you don't. The rules are different in every state. So you have to go and look at that. If you are an AOT member, they have a very convenient document that you can find on there that spells that out for you for each state. I have to say, though, don't be intimidated if you need a doctor's order. It's people get really overwhelmed by some of these things that I'm going to talk about today, but they're not as complicated as you think they are. And so it doesn't need to be a bigger deal. And I think this is one reason why people might want to call it tutoring, for example, because they don't want to get the doctor's order. Look, families will get it for you. It's so easy. You can just say, okay, just call your doctor and have them send me something. Then that is off your plate, except just to make sure you're checking the box with it. So if you want to take as much off your plate as possible, families are often happy to do that if they want your services. And so don't feel like you have to find the doctor's order and get all this information ahead of time. Just have the families reach out on your behalf to be able to get that. And generally, doctors are faster at responding to them than they are to us anyway. So that's a great way to handle that to make it a little bit of a lighter load. Um, Most practice acts, in fact, just best practice in general, require that you have an evaluation, a plan of care, and documentation. And I think one reason this especially can freak out pediatric therapists is because we tend to do a lot of standardized tests. We tend to have reports that are multiple pages. And it feels like this big production and it takes us hours to write. And no one says you have to write a big report. No one says have to use a standardized test. So I'm going to tell you what I would do for my groups that I used to run. I would do an evaluation the first session. So I prescribed our activities. For instance, I did a self-regulation group and I would prescribe the activities for each session for the first session that I made sure we targeted all the things I wanted to target in this group. So, for example, we would do different kinds of movement activities. Well, how do they do with that? Does it dysregulate them more? I would do some free play. How do they handle the peer interactions with that? How do they handle transitions? We would do multiple transitions. These were a lot of the pieces that I would have as my goals for the group. And then we would just do that. I could go document what we did, and then it was very easy. It wasn't, if that was my evaluation, it can be a SOAP note. You have to have something that is an assessment that shows where the deficits are and what the needs are. Oftentimes in this kind of setting, we don't have, if you're seeing kids just on the side, if you've ever worked in a private practice, you know you hardly ever get all the information in this one little snapshot of a kid. So you can also say part of your plan is that you will continue to gather data. And you don't have to have every little piece like we often feel like we need for these school-based evaluations where we have all this stuff, right? So it depends, whatever your group is, you just assess that or whatever the kid is, the concerns are for that kid. So put it into a SOAP note. That can be an evaluation. It's got that assessment section. It's got an objective data section. So that doesn't have to be a big fancy report. You can choose to do that if you feel like you need that information. You're going to want to charge more for that if you are, but don't feel like you have to if it's going to intimidate you from getting clients or it's going to be um, too much and that's a piece that you really don't like to do, right? The plan of care, you have to have some kind of goals. Like that's the reason we do what we do, right? You have to have some kind of goals that say what we're doing. And I see there's things in the chat. I will check that in just a minute in case you have questions. Um, but again, if you're doing a group therapy thing, I'll tell you what I did for that. I had my group goals written on one page, and I would put the kid's name at the top for each one, and I would just check the boxes for the ones that they actually need. So it didn't have to be um, again, it doesn't have to be like trying to come up with goals for every kid in a group. And even that is handy for kids that you might see individually. Just have like a bank and then copy them over. So you are probably already have some things just that you use at school. It's not that hard to do that piece of that. And then documentation, you have to write a note. In fact, this is again, it's in the Practice Act, most places, and part of our just best practices that you document what you did and how they responded to what you did. So you do have to consider including all these things, even if you're just taking on a couple of kids. The other thing that's important to note is the good faith estimate. So this is a document that is a legal document, and we are supposed to provide. Everything we're talking about here today is really just private pay services because you're not going to go get in network with insurance, I'm sure, just to take on a couple of people. That's a lot of work. So you have to give this thing called a good faith estimate, and you can Google it and probably find a form that will work for you for that. There's certain things it needs to include, but just know that that's a piece that you have to have. I'm just going to check the chat real quick. Any questions? Hey, thanks you all for being here. I appreciate it. Okay, moving on. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this training at this time because this comes up every year in all the school-based groups. And that's, I want to do handwriting tutoring or I want to do coaching and I'm not going to call it therapy. And you can get some really bad advice when people respond to your questions about this. You're held to your highest license. So thinking about how you are going to provide services, if you are the one that is providing handwriting intervention, just calling it something else by saying it's tutoring doesn't make it tutoring and not therapy. So please keep that in mind. Same with coaching. If it's something that's in the OT practice framework, it's probably therapy that you're doing. And you know what? It's awesome because you can get better clients. You can charge more money if we call it therapy as opposed to calling it tutoring. It's actually better for you to use the license and the work and the training that you have. You can't unknow what you know. So trying to figure out where that line is between a tutor and a therapist is really hard. Now, if you're an occupational therapist and you're going to go tutor math, that's not part of what we do. We're not trained to teach math. So yeah, you can call that tutoring, right? But if you're going and doing something that we do every day that's addressing motor skills and functional skills like handwriting, and self-care and all those things, then yeah, it's probably therapy. And you want to protect yourself. It's just not worth it. I know there's people that do it, and just because they do it does not make it okay. And you spend a lot of money and time to earn your degree that it's not worth the risk. All it takes is one savvy parent with a bad attitude to go to the board and report you. So it's best to just follow this. And one thing to think about for things like groups or summer camps, I feel like camps can be a little bit of a different situation. What you can think about there is you might make the plan for a summer camp, for example, like an enrichment for different motor skills. You might do that if you want to have a summer camp. The question is, can you give all that to a high schooler to implement for you? If you're going to go do it and you're going to be changing things up and modifying them and doing like we do in therapy, that's therapy. So you have to make sure you are absolutely clear where that line is drawn, that everyone just does the same thing. We're not modifying it. We're not doing things that a little bit differently for every kid. We're doing exactly the same. I think for individual therapy, that's a lot harder because we can't not do that stuff. We want to help. And so we all just do it naturally. And I think you're going to get yourself into trouble if you try to call it tutoring because it's really therapy. You're going to end up doing therapy. So just keep that in mind that you've got to be very careful. Now, if you have certain specialties and trainings, let me think of a good example, like potty training, for example. I think there's some people who might know a little bit more about potty training and they can coach parents and that kind of thing. That may not be therapy. If coaching parents, not necessarily therapy unless you are working with the kid too. So if a parent approaches you and you're just doing that, coaching them, and you're not doing an evaluation first, then of their kid or observing their kid while you're talking with the parent, then you can probably call that coaching of the parent. It's just parent coaching. If it's in the context of working with a child, even if it's a child that you are seeing at school, that's more therapy. So you really got to be mindful and of this particular thing and not get yourself into trouble. There are just some people that will be nasty and one wrong thing you say and they're going to go to the board. So don't risk it. Okay. Um, you should already have malpractice insurance. That's just good for everyone to have. Um, there's some other insurances that if you were going into a full-on private practice that we might recommend that you have, but for this purposes of just doing something on the side with over the summer, generally your malpractice insurance, you can get a personal plan. Once you start a full-time business, you're going to need to change that up. There's some other things that you'd want to have in place as well because of just other things you're going to be doing with your time. So I'd say don't worry too much about those. If you're interested in knowing what those are, feel free to ask. But generally, not appropriate when you're just starting out and seeing a couple people. Some forms that are must-haves. There's some things that are good to have, and there's those that are must-haves. Again, I'm trying to give you the bare bones here. There's some things you probably want to put a little more work into, but it's up to you on how much you want to do. So informed consent is a must. So you need a document that the parent signs, it understands the risks and benefits to therapy and says that they agree to it. One of the things about informed consent that's really important for those of us who work with kids is to acknowledge that whoever is signing that form needs to have legal authority for that child. So, for example, in some places, a foster parent cannot sign that. It has to be someone through the state that's part of the foster program that does it. So you have to be mindful of that. If they are a step parent, they may not have that legal authority. Sometimes there's divorces where one parent gets authority and the other one doesn't. So you want to have something that acknowledges that they are the legal person to sign that for you. So like on my form, I just have a statement that says that I have legal authority to make healthcare decisions for this child. So something like that would be helpful for you. And then a HIPAA privacy practices, they mean the same thing. A form that says how you manage that. Again, this is a template that you can probably find or purchase. And it's just something that you give them to make sure that you are keeping everything in order. And then the good faith estimate, as I mentioned before. So this is one of the things that these are forms you can buy from someone, or you can uh, find, you might be able to find some of these online. But if you can't find them, please reach out. I do sell these if you want them, but I sell them all as a packet, and you may not need all of these. There's more than even what you see here that I offer. So policies, these are good to have. So you might have your policies and fee agreement. It might be one document that has something like, this is what we charge. And these people are signing that they agree to pay it. These are our policies. Like, if you don't show up, you're getting charged anyway. Or, you get one freebie, or however you want to phrase it, to give people a little bit of grace. But you want to make sure you have some things in place, and that they have to pay at the time of service and all those things. You probably want some kind of history form that gives you some information about the child if they're new to you completely. So you get some kind of medical history and gather some information from the families and things like, like we need before we see people. So, but how detailed you want to get in that is up to you, and whatever you feel like you need for your evaluation and what kinds of things you're going to be working on. Okay, any questions?
Hey, Alicia, there's one question from Daniel.
Oh, I see. Informed consent necessary for adults. Yes. Yes, you always need it. Informed consent is always necessary in healthcare. Let's talk about documentation. So as I said before, you do need to document your services. It's okay to do it on paper, but you just have to have a place that you can lock it up. And you can get something cloud-based. So Google, I should have put Workspace in there. Google Workspace, you have to be HIPAA compliant. So you need to keep it secure. And this is where you have to really balance the cost of some of these things with how much you can actually bring in. And the thing about paper is great, but you also have to store it for years. Every state has different requirements, actually, whether it's cloud-based or paper, you have to store it for years. And so you have to keep that in mind, that there needs to be a place you can lock it up. And and apparently you shouldn't just have it in your attic. So being just locked up in your house is not sufficient. I know somebody that got in trouble because she had it in her attic, and it wasn't in a locked cabinet in the attic. And so it really needs to be like a place you can keep it very secure. I think somebody had to turn that person in. So that's not likely to happen unless someone has a vendetta for you. But just keep that in mind, that you may have to store this for many, many, many years. So generally, in most places, the minimum is 7 years, but some states have requirements to keep it 10. Um, I, I wish I could find this resource again. I came across one in North Carolina, which is where I'm at, and I think it said we had to keep the kids' stuff until they were 30 or something. Don't quote me on that, because I can't find that resource again. I happened to just come across it one time, and I haven't gone back to do a super deep dive to find it. But there are rules about how long you have to store documentation, and so keep that in mind when you're making your decision and how long you plan to do all that, because it might end up being a lot for you to have to just store something. And if you're just seeing a few people, you can get a little lockbox. Like, that's not that big of a deal. This is the tricky thing, is finding the clients. And so one of the reasons I wanted to do this in February is because now is the time that parents are planning for the summer. And so the sooner that we can get our stuff out there and start to get the word out, the sooner then we're going to get those people coming to see us. And so uh, I just put a couple of ideas for you all. Knowing other parents is a real plus. People who might have kids that want to be seen. And the thing is, you might already hear from people. There might be coworkers with kids or something that want their kids seen. And so that can be an easy way to get clients, is if they're through the people you already know. parent groups on Facebook, if you're a parent and can join those, that can be a good way. Generally, they don't allow like, self-promotion in those, but if you can make comments on people asking questions, then sometimes that's a way to get people. As someone who's not a parent, I could never join those groups, but it's something that you can try if you are a parent. Other professionals are really great for networking as well. And so, for example, maybe there's some people who see adults, other therapists that see adults in your area, and they may still get calls for people looking for pediatric clients. Those are people that might be good to network with, to say you can direct them towards me if anyone calls you about summer therapy for their kid, because I see that you just do adults. So those are some places to try. If you don't already have a network in mind that you can tap into, then you really do need to start as soon as possible reaching out to different people in the community, different professionals. So there's other speech therapists that you might know, or that you might come across. Counselors tend to be often a little bit better than like a physical therapist, depending what you're looking for, just because there's not a ton of pediatric PTs in the community. If there's places that even have a wait list over the summer, those might be good to reach out to. Now, things like social media, other than being in a group, is not that great. So you might get gung ho and think, oh, if I make a page for my little business, people are going to see that, and then I might get people that way. It doesn't hurt to necessarily have someone somewhere to direct people to, but most of the time, that's going to be such a waste of your time. So if you don't plan to do it as a full-time thing or something on a regular basis, it's not really worth your time to set up a page for yourself. People don't go to social media to find therapists. They're not looking up businesses there. They're going to Google. And so yeah, I wouldn't put too much effort into like making posts and things like that, because it's not really how people find therapists. So networking and Google are where most people are going to find you. And just speaking of that too, before I forget, one of the things that you might want to think about, I think I forgot to put this on a slide, is that because you are a business, technically, even if you take one client, you've got your own business. One of the things to think about is it does change up your taxes a little bit, because that's money that's not taxed. And so you have to be able to set some of that money aside. It's If you plan to do a little bit more than just one or two clients, definitely get a separate business banking account, because that's you're going to want to keep that separate. Taxes are also a little more complicated because there's another form that needs to be filled out. Now, anything that you spend can potentially be a deduction. So there's a benefit to that too. It's also not a bad idea to get a tax ID number. So optional. You can use your social security number, but it's also if the parents ask for some more information from you, or you have to document something, it doesn't hurt to do those things. So, and it protects you a little bit more to have a tax ID number. Totally free to go get that on the irs.gov site. And it's very easy to do. So just think about that. You have to have that in place to get a business account. You might have to have a business name as well. So, but just keep that in mind, that your taxes you're going to have to hold that money aside, some money aside for taxes. And just as another point in that, if money is not held out and you're working for yourself, you have to think about the fact that you're getting about 60% of that, about 40%. That's probably a little high, 35. My accountant always told me about 40, but it's closer probably to 35% is actually going to be going into taxes, because you have to pay a little bit extra when you work for yourself. It's kind of ridiculous. Your employer pays it now. But when you work for yourself, you pay what the employer pays too. Now, what to charge is a little tricky. And again, taxes are important to think about. So I have experience doing groups and individual therapy, but I have not ever run a camp myself. So I'm just going to show you what I have learned from other people doing camps. First of all, how to price this is so wide, it's so widely varied. I can't really give you a range for that. It depends if you're going to do a full day camp, a partial day camp. Is it going to be 2 hours? Is it going to be 4 hours? Keeping in mind that if you're going to do a full day camp, that you're going to have to feed the kids. You're going to have to figure out how many kids you need to see just to make it viable. Um, Space to rent, how much is that going to cost? You have to factor all that stuff in if you're going to do that. Now, camps tend to be a little bit easier, and as far as getting people over the summer because groups where it's like once or twice a week can be really hard when people are trying to schedule vacations. It's doable. I've done them over the summer many times, but camps sometimes are like, okay, I can make sure the parents can say, I can make sure this week we are available so that we can go do this experience with them. You also have to factor in with camps, do you have to rent a space? Do you have to pay someone to help you? Because if you're going to have quite a few kids in there, you might need another body just for safety. So there's a lot of things to think about in what you might charge. And, if you are somebody who's got property where you can legally, zoning wise, take on some people on your property and you've got maybe teenagers to help or something, this might work out really nicely for you because that would make your overhead very low. But if you have to, be somewhere where you'd have to spend money to rent a space, that could eat into how much you charge. And those are all things you have to factor in before you come up with a price for the people to participate. So just keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, you can get free labor a lot of times, but they're not necessarily going to be reliable. So for example, there might be people looking for shadowing hours that would love to help you. And if you can get them to commit for the time of your camp, then you've got some free labor and just have them sign a confidentiality thing. Again, this is where you have to really decide, is this a therapy camp or is this not a therapy camp? Is it more of an enrichment thing? So again, can you set it up as the therapy brain person and give it to a high schooler to implement? Then you might be okay in that. I don't think you can easily do that with anything else. Groups would be really hard, individual would be very hard. So group therapy, uh, 6 to 8 weeks at the most. Like don't do anything longer than 8 weeks, or you're gonna find that people can't attend. As far as like places to rent, sometimes if you're interested in a Saturday group, man, that's ideal. That's great. I had the best luck finding other places to rent that were Saturday mornings because it wasn't being used like a therapy space when I didn't have my own space. And so I would rent from another therapy office to do my groups, and it worked out great. And um, sometimes the charge of what people want to charge you sometimes a little like a ridiculous amount. So it has to be worth it. It has to be worth your time and what they're willing to spend to have you in that space. I also rented from a church, and I think they charge $50 per day for each of my days of group, which ate into the time quite a bit. And so I had to have a certain number of kids to be able to make it viable. They allowed me as much time as I needed to set up and all that, but $50 was a lot. So you don't want to spend very much if you can help it. Free is great if you can get it. But the other thing to think about with camps and groups is that you may have an expense of, this is one of the other insurances that you might need as a private practice person if you were going to make a more of a full-time practice, but definitely you might need this anyway, is the business insurance. So if you are renting from a space, they may require that you have business liability insurance. And what that does is it protects their location if someone is injured on their property because you're the one that's bringing them into that space. It protects a few other things as well, but that would be the main reason why someone who's renting to you might want that. So that could be a pretty significant expense for you that might make it not worth it too. So those are just things that you have to factor in when you're deciding what to charge. I'll go ahead and tell you what I charged for my groups. I didn't charge a lot for my handwriting groups. I think I was charging 35, I think, per person per group because I could have a few more kids in there. And people just weren't willing to pay that much for handwriting, to be honest. I ultimately phased out my handwriting group because they're not going to pay like what the self-regulation parents pay. And there I was charging 65 to 70 per person per group. And so those are just my rates as an experienced person with a very structured plan. I did a lot of training with the parents as well. Like they got a couple of Zoom calls. So that was factored into that as well. So I wouldn't just say like, go start charging $600 for a group without having a clear process and structure and clarify to everybody what you're giving. And, if you can give some time to the parents, but I would pare that way down. That was for an 8-week group, by the way. So, yeah, pare that way down if you are going to do anything very minimal. If you're going to keep it minimal. Mine was kind of tried and true over time. And so I did a lot of like handouts and trainings with the parents. And so that's why I feel like I could charge that. And people paid it. People did pay it. So individual therapy, again, this is going to depend a little bit where you are. This one I can give you a better number for too, because I think that I want to give you a range. It's going to vary, depend on what your length of session is. It's going to vary based on where you are and how much you travel. But generally 100 is the least you should charge. 100 to 150 is sort of average. So at least that gives you a jumping off point from where you're at. Mileage might be something if there's somebody that's really far out and they're willing to pay your private pay rates, you might want to charge a little extra for that. So keep a zone and charge a little like 20 bucks if they're outside of this 10 minutes or something. And people will pay that too sometimes because they want the convenience of you going to their house. So those are things just to keep in mind. Price wise, and it is really hard to come up with a rate for yourself. Again, if you are going full time into private practice, this is something we would sit down with you and talk a little bit more about. There's a lot more you have to think about. We've got spreadsheets in the Business Builder program that we go through and like what is it you have to live on? What is it you need to bring in? But for just a couple side gig kids, like those are some rough numbers for you. And it's not factoring in all your stuff either. So that's better to get some guidance and mentorship if you're going to go full time into private practice. So you also have to figure out if this is even sustainable. Like if you do have to rent a space, how much is it going to cost? Are you driving 30 minutes for an hour treatment and driving back? Well, cut your rate in half in your head because now you're working 2 hours for 1 hour of pay. So just like those are the things you have to think about to have kind of a more business mindset when you're deciding what to charge. Okay. Any questions popping up there? Okay. Um, trying to see if there's anything else I missed before I get into this. Okay. Um, okay. Some things to think about, kind of related to most of it that I've said already, but just here's a kind of a questionnaire for yourself as you decide if this is something that's for you. So first of all, is it within your licensure and scope of practice? Okay. If it is, don't call it tutoring or coaching. Um, do you have the training for what you're going to do? Now, a lot of I put this in here really because sometimes what people think is that to be able to take clients yourself, you have to go get some kind of certification or special training or something that makes you look like you're, put extra letters after your name or a special certification after your name. Parents don't care. They don't notice that. But, make sure that you are trained to do the thing that the client wants. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my very, very, very first client as a private practice owner. It was a hot mess. It was so ugly. It was such a bad experience. Um, did not collect enough information. So this kid had really bad anxiety, was non-speaking, had a communication device. They expected to come to a place that was had a sensory gym and he could go swing and all that. I just had a little office. That's all I was renting at the time because, Lou is a cheaper way to go. And he ended up like knocking over his grandma was the legal guardian, and he ended up knocking her over at one point and they forgot his communication device. And so basically, I didn't gather enough information ahead of time. I would have told them I wasn't a good fit for them, knowing what they were looking for. So I talked to them about the therapy itself, and I'm like, I can do that, I think, but it we had a mismatch because I didn't ask enough questions and communicate enough about my own experience. And so, um, just making sure that you're not taking on people that you don't have the training for and that you get enough information from them too. So, does it align with your philosophy? I know a lot of people are anti-ABA, for example. Would you be okay though with going into an ABA clinic to go work with a student, work with a child? Um, or somebody's going to. So is it okay for you to be doing that? Does that make you not neuroaffirming? Those are kind of things that you might want to question yourself ahead of time before people start calling you. Same with that might be an ethical problem for you as well. Um, Sometimes what you run into as well is that maybe there's something going on at the there might be something ethically that comes up at the house, like if you're going to people's homes with a babysitter, or they're doing things a certain way at the house that you want to maybe change up how, like they're just doing things in a way that's not good for you. So sometimes just asking questions ahead of time, like tell me about your setup. How do you envision this? And ask some of those questions ahead of time for people that you might see. What do you envision me doing when I come to your house? When they might just say therapy, but like, do you have a space we can work in? Is there anybody, other adults that are going to be present? Um, just things to keep in mind. So you're asking some of the right questions before people come see you. Um, will undermine school relationships. Of course, that is when it might be an issue if you're working even with the kids of people that are coworkers, right? So is that going to potentially bring some trouble for you if things don't go as planned? Is there going to be any conflict between providers? Sometimes people do go for extra, so they might have their kid in a therapy like year round, and they're wanting a little extra from another therapist. Do they have another therapist that's already seeing that kid? Is there any conflict with that? Like these are just things to think about that sometimes might come up for you before you just get involved in it. Um, and the IEP processes. And I will say, so I've seen this conflict of interest. It's been very confusing. At one point, there was a school district that I was contracted to, and their speech therapists were contracted as well. And they had all their speech therapists just billing Medicaid. So they came in and just the contractors just came in and saw the Medicaid kids. And so that saved the school district some money because they would treat these Medicaid kids as like private clients and bill Medicaid privately instead of going through the school district to do that. And I remember sitting in this group in this classroom, and this speech therapist prior to spring break was talking to this parent that showed up, and she's like, "Oh, well, we can work in the library over spring break." And it was just it was a conflict of interest that this made it look like you could get IP services through the summer or through through spring break. And it just created this like it just wasn't good. It just wasn't good. So just making sure that you're not getting involved in any of that. Um, and do you need a space? Like that's huge because if you're happy going to people's homes, again, as far as that goes, think ahead about what's okay with you, what's not okay. If are you sensitive to scents and want to make sure they don't have any like Glade plugins? Do they have pets that you might be allergic to or be scared of? And or do they smoke? And any of those kind of things that you might want to set up ahead of time if you are sensitive to any of those kind of things, or they might bother you. Same with like safety and having a space that's safe for the kid to do some movement in if that's what you planned that you think you might need to do with them. Is it okay that you maybe bat a balloon in their living room, for example, or there could be breakables? So just some of that stuff to think about ahead of time that you might not until you have experience and learn the hard way on some things. So I ran through a lot of that relatively quickly, but I would love to hear if you have some questions. Again, I want to tell you a little bit just about this is kind of bare bones here, right? So if you're going to do a coaching program, or doing a private practice, I highly recommend a coaching program. Um, I'm a little biased to being here through Next Level, but I'm going to even though I'm with Next Level, I'm going to tell you, they have a great program and it really walks you through all the things that you need to do. The thing about having a structured program is that you don't know what you don't know. And so, I've had people come to me for coaching before, just like an individual thing. And it's a great time to ask questions. If you've got questions, I can answer your questions, for example, just um, as a mentor and coach, but I don't know what you don't know. So I can't go through all the things in a 1 hour coaching call with people. So when you go through a structured program, it's really, really helpful to make sure you don't miss anything. And I like I said, I know I'm with Next Level on this, but I've had a lot of coaching experiences myself, and having a team is such an important piece if you are going to look for a program. I had a coaching program, a coach that I hired. I spent a lot of money for this coach, and he had a nervous breakdown, didn't follow through on all his stuff. He just decided, I'm not doing this business anymore. And then I was out of luck. I could have probably taken him to court. he gave me a little bit of my money back when I complained, but not nearly, still never followed through on the things he was going to do. I've had others where they tell you what to do, but they don't tell you how to do it. They're like, here, go take, here's a form for you that tells you all the things you need to be monitoring. But I'm like, I'm not a spreadsheet person. So having somebody just tell me I need a spreadsheet is like the worst. So give me a spreadsheet and I can plug in numbers and thank you. That makes a huge difference. And so there's a lot of that stuff you get with the next level business builder program. If you are in a if you decide at some point that you are going to move past just seeing a couple of clients and do something full time, I highly recommend looking into something where there's a team and then they really go through all the stuff and they give you stuff like so. Um, I'm only biased because I'm on the back end and I can see all the things that they do, and I've had my own experiences that haven't been nearly as positive as I see in this program and all the one-on-one help that you get. So I had to say my 2 cents on that. All right, any questions? I know that was a lot of information. I hope it's not too overwhelming for you. Thanks, Brittany. Daniel, um, EMR software like Hello Note provide forms like in HIPAA. Some of them might not. I think if you're going to save any of your stuff in an EMR, you have to keep paying for it. So if you I don't know if you can all see the questions, but Daniel's asking about keeping all of your documentation in EMR. Yeah, it'll store it for you, but you have to keep paying for it. You can usually download them and store them in a Google. Google would be cheaper, honestly. If you had the Google Workspace HIPAA compliant, would probably be cheaper than having an EMR if you're not using the EMR just to store it. But generally, yes, that's where they store everything if you're using that. EMRs are great, except that they do cost money, and you don't need one. Um, I do think Hello Note, though, I think has a free plan that you can get of, you can have a couple of clients through them without having to pay anything. And I think they would store it, but I don't know if if that's over many years of having that, if that went away, and then you suddenly had to start paying, they may not keep that plan forever. So hopefully that answered your question. Anything else? And I did not put my email in there on the thing anymore, but I think I'm on the website. If there's anything that comes up, I'm putting my email in the chat. Feel free to get some clarification by sending me an email. Just know I may not be able to get to you right away. It might take me a couple of days. I guess I get a lot of emails between all the activities I'm doing with my entrepreneurial stuff. So thanks, Kara. Okay, anything else before we wrap up? Thanks everyone for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alicia. Bye, everyone.